Yes.
Thank you so much. All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order for the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Water Resources Advisory Committee.
I'm on.
Affectionately known as WRAC, for today, Wednesday, May 5th, 2021. Thank you all for being here. Welcome, welcome. And I think we're going to go ahead and do our roll call check. And Brendan, if you could do it slowly enough for folks to be able to, one, make sure they've been heard, but also just so that folks know who's who.
Yep.
Great, thank you, sir.
Just one moment and I'll get started.
Great. And just looking ahead, we'll have, obviously today's meeting is virtual. We'll have our next month's meeting virtual, and then we do anticipate being in person and or a hybrid in the fall, because we'll take a July and August recess.
Okay, I'll go through the members that I see present, and then if any members don't hear their name, please let me know after. Okay, I see Melanie M for Melanie B for District 1. Pavo for yes, District 3. I got Tim Walters for Development at Large, Christine Mulholland, Environmental at Large, and Eric Greening and David Chipping, also Environmental at Large. Okay, and I see Linda Chipping for Coastal San Luis RCD, Brett Burchett for County Farm Bureau. I'll just check Camp Slow. John Reed, were you able to call in?
Yes, I was. Thank you.
Great. Glad you could join us. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Josh Alvidrez for Golden State Water, Steve Sinton, Shandon San Juan Water District. I've got Lee and Hillary for Estrella El Pomar Creston Water District. Lon George for City of AG. Robert for City of Grover Beach.
Here.
And Andy, I've got you for City of SLO. Ray for Cambria CSD. Ron Munn, Solososo CSD, and Ed Eby, Napomo CSD. I see Shirley, Director Gibson, I've got you for Oceano. Did I miss any members or alternates?
This is Deborah Logan, TCSD.
Oh, thanks, Deborah. Sorry about that.
No problem. I just joined.
Great. Okay. Any other members or alternates?
This is Jamie Hendrickson with Escudero Mutual Water Company.
Thanks, Jamie.
Oh, thanks, Jamie. All right, I've got 21.
Fabulous, 21. Thanks all for being here. Are there any other folks who want to introduce themselves to the group?
Hi, this is Patricia Wilmore from the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance.
Thanks, Patricia. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
And this is Matthew Scordado, Santa Barbara County Water Agency.
Oh, thanks.
Hey.
Greg Grayball from Creston.
Hey, Greg.
Hi.
This is Nick Teague, Water Resources Program Manager with the City of San Luis Obispo.
Hi, Nick. Thanks. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Madeline Travis. I'm helping to facilitate the Stormwater Capture Subcommittee.
Great. Thanks, Madeline. Nice to see you. Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get rolling here. We've got the next order of business is approval of the February 3rd meeting minutes. If you might recall, we had a couple questions last time as we reviewed the minutes, and so we asked our secretary to go back and do an update. They have since been updated. Any other questions on February 3rd meeting minutes? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I move approval of February 3rd minutes.
Thank you, Christine. A second?
I'll second.
Who, just to clarify, is that you, John?
Yeah, that's John from Camp San Luis Obispo.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, thanks, John. All
welcome.
right. And as we have made it our practice that we do these by consensus, so I'm assuming you're approving the minutes, but now is your opportunity. Are there any no votes for the February 3rd minute approvals? You can just speak up if so. And I have not been, okay. Terrific, thank you. And then now, so minutes approved for February 3rd. Now let's go to the April 7th meeting minutes. Any comments, corrections on those minutes? Seeing none. And I guess I didn't kind of share protocols. You're welcome. There's a raise hand mechanism, but you can also just unmute and holler if you want to do that. Okay. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Christine.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second, Steve Simpson.
Thank you, Steve. Same process. I'm going to assume you approve, except now is your opportunity. Are there any no votes on the meeting minutes? Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So those two items are approved. We're going to go through the ongoing updates. I'm going to pause at each one, and if you have anything you'd like to bring up. And before we get rolling on that, under what item will we get kind of a brief update for the stormwater task force? Is that under various county programs? When does Madeline kind of chime in on?
The end of the ongoing updates, I think is appropriate.
Okay, terrific, thank you. Okay, anyone on rain and reservoir report? It's getting drier. That's the summary there. California Drought Monitor summary, also that one. Groundwater basin management efforts. IRWM. Stormwater resource plan. We are an efficient group today. Various county water programs, policies, ordinances. Catch all there. All right, and then our last item on ongoing updates, and it is chock full of information, so I hope everybody had a chance to read it because it really is a lot of information in there. Open reporting on water conservation opportunities and information. I'd love to kind of give a brief update. If I don't know who is up for that in terms of our ad hoc stormwater capture process.
Hi, Andy. This is Mladen.
Yeah, hey, Mladen.
Yeah, I think Madeline was going to provide an update from that meeting.
Terrific. All right, Madeline.
Perfect. Hi, thank you. Yes, so at our last meeting on April 22nd, we had a great discussion about shifting direction from the form of going forward with a public workshop to go down the road of more targeted outreach for some more focused conversations with perhaps the water districts and the Farm Bureau. So giving targeted presentations rather than at this point going forward with a countywide public forum. We then reviewed the draft guidance documents and weighed in on how to best structure that document and agreed to meet next on May 27th, after which point I will provide a presentation at the next WRAC meeting in June about what we've discussed throughout our subcommittee discussions, as well as my outside outreach and research findings, to share the recommendations you've come up with, and then open that up for discussion then.
Great, thank you. So yeah, that meetings, we've been meeting quite a few times, and looking forward to kind of wrapping this up over the next month. I don't know, Ron, Steve, Hillary, if you guys want to chime in on anything else to add right now. Otherwise, we will just plan on a full agenda item next month, right, to kind of capture that. I've been very impressed and inspired, and think there's some great work going on over there. So thank you, Madeline. All right, our next item is review and discuss proposed county flood control and water conservation district budget and consider actions. Is this Courtney taking care of this for us?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Just
Hi, everybody.
one moment. I'll get it up. The slides up here.
Thank you.
Thanks. My name's Courtney Howard. For those of you who don't know me, Water Resources Division in Public Works. This is the time of year when we review the flood control district's budget with you. Again, this is for what we call Zone General, which is our kind of county-wide efforts, not specific to any particular zone of benefit that's been established, such as Zone 3 for the Lopez Reservoir and Supply Project, just to name one as an example. So I'm going to run through our normal presentation here. And last year, unfortunately, we had to cancel because COVID had just hit. And we've just provided this in a packet. So this will be an opportunity to go through. What I've added from the past is some slides on accomplishments and our next priorities. So I look forward to going over that with you, and some of my teammates are going to share that information as well. So I'll be handing off to them for those slides, just so you know. All right. We'll just go to the next slide. So I'm just going to review the budget management policy that the board's adopted, go over again those priorities that I mentioned, and then we can look at some of the detail. I'll follow your lead on that. We have several documents included in the packet that provide a lot of the detail, the numbers, the 5-year plan. Happy to go over those as questions arise. So going back to the policy, which was also included in your packet, really focusing on keeping a pulse on conditions countywide, understanding those conditions, and for conditions that are not favorable or heading in the wrong direction, we work with stakeholders in those areas to establish sustainability goals, both in those watersheds or groundwater basins and countywide. And then once we know where we want to go with those watersheds and groundwater basins, we look at opportunities to get them there. And then if the communities or stakeholders want to implement those solutions, then we kind of help with starting them up, getting them established in terms of funding and their governance structure and ongoing operation and maintenance of those solutions. So then they kind of graduate to running them on their own. So we're looking at our existing needs, resiliency, and the future when we're doing that. So our first funding priority, of course, again, is for regional programmatic services. So we look for those economies of scale for where we can do certain studies or certain efforts on a county-wide basis, where there's common interest across the county to understand different water resources related information. And our second funding priority is to make sure that the district is solvent and the county with respect to water projects and programs that we do. So sometimes our zones need a little bit of cash flow help. So that's our second kind of funding priority. And then what we have left is our third funding priority, and really looking at those sub-regional needs and trying to prioritize where to focus. And you'll see some of that in the upcoming slides as we talk through what we've been working on and what we plan to work on. And so when we look at those efforts, we've grouped them into various programs. We have kind of our overarching management program that oversees the whole flood control zone general budget and the staffing that goes along with that to make sure we're efficient going forward. We have our regional program that kind of ties everything together on a county-wide scale. We've got our technical program that supports all the data and information we need to do the analysis. And then we have more of a sub-regional scale where we're looking at groundwater basins or watersheds or both of them together, ideally. And so we've got projects and programs related to that. Our overall budget is about $3.4 million. About 75–76% of that is labor. You know, we're pretty program intensive with IRWM, countywide data collection, things like that. But then we have about 24% for, you know, hiring consultants, getting new equipment, things like that. So that's our annual, basically that's what comes in from the tax revenue. And we've been real successful over the years pursuing IRWM grants and other project-specific grants that are appropriate for flood control zone general efforts. So we've been able to build a healthy reserve, leveraging any grant programs out there as well. But this is our kind of our baseline budget that we work with. Okay, so I'm gonna go through each of those programs, what we've accomplished and what we're looking forward to doing next. And that should line up with what we've put together as our budget for next fiscal year. Again, looking at our existing contractual obligations and commitments, what the board has given us as priorities, what's required for any grants we've received or intend to go after. And then a lot of what we've been doing, especially on the staffing level, is supporting the planning phase of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Next slide. Okay, so for the management program priorities, we've been working with the other water agencies in the county at a staff level to really collaborate on how we can be more resilient regionally through interagency partnerships. And so we've been working on developing that plan and hope to present that to the WRAC in September. So we're getting real close to having that analysis to present to you. And then, as you know, we've had a lot of state water contract policy issues come forward with the state's different amendments that they've put forth. And as the holder of the contract, it's been our obligation to respond to those, and we have, and the WRAC's been engaged in that, which we really appreciate. But looking forward, the board has made the decision to establish a groundwater sustainability agency director position that will live outside of public works. And so our staff will not be staffing the SGMA planning phase anymore. And so our next priority effort is transitioning once that director is hired. So that will be a significant effort. And then looking forward, we want to make sure that now that the planning phase is over and we're going back to our county-wide look, we'll be making sure that we have maybe revisiting this budgeting, not the overall policy, but how we present it to you. Maybe instead of a 5-year plan, it's a further looking plan. We want to kind of just revisit, because it's been a while, we've been using this tool for a while, so just kind of want to check it and make any improvements. And then, so that's what we're looking forward for the management program side of things. And the next one, I believe, is regional, and I'll hand it over to Brendan.
Yeah, so I'll present on the regional program and the watershed program. I supervise both of these programs. So first, for regional, our accomplishments is we did receive a grant a few months ago related to updating our countywide water supply and demand calculations. Our last comprehensive countywide look at water supply and demand was with the 2012 Master Water Report. And so this has been a project that's been in our 5-year plan for a time, and there was a grant opportunity that aligned with what we wanted to do. And so that's pretty cool. And you see in our objectives, we're going to be kicking that project off here in the upcoming fiscal year and developing a scope and hiring that consultant. And definitely we'll be keeping the WRAC updated on that project as we move forward. So that's really exciting. I did want to highlight that we continued a lot of what we do in a regional program is interactive and engaging with others, whether it's you in the WRAC, with other parties related to our grants that we oversee, and the resiliency planning that Courtney mentioned with staff from other agencies around the county. And so we continued all of that through the pandemic, shifted to different methods and ways, but really continued our work, our coordination work that we do in our planning. So I'd consider that an accomplishment. And then lastly, providing the comprehensive water supply update to the Board of Supervisors was a big accomplishment and win for the regional unit. It took a couple months to get all of that together, and I presented kind of the skeleton of it to the committee last month, but that was a big accomplishment. So looking forward, I mentioned already the supply and demand project. We'll be continuing to support the state water policy related items, as Courtney mentioned. We are anticipating next fiscal year, to begin the round 2 IRWM grant. So this will be an implementation grant where the Flood Control District is the lead agency, and we submit one application on behalf of the entire county and with a suite of projects, and that next round will be kicking off later this calendar year. And then we have all the agreements, sub-agreements, and kicking off invoicing and just getting that entire ball rolling for the last grant that we received. We were awarded last year. So making sure that's set up to go, and our 5 local project sponsors for the round 1 grant can receive their funds. So that's, I'd say those are our highlight objectives for the regional program. And now I'll do watershed. So big accomplishment was implementing the Stormwater Resources Plan that was completed earlier in 2020. And implementing this plan, there was a grant opportunity, and want to highlight that Oceano CSD was awarded a grant through this program. So big win for them, and a win for us as well in setting up this program and enabling the eligibility for these types of funds. So we also completed an internal assessment of the existing drainage studies throughout the county. There's various drainage studies that were done 20, 25 years ago in Los Osos, Napomo, San Miguel, other areas throughout the county. And we have assessed, what are those recommendations were completed, partially completed, or not completed, and trying to find those next steps. Is it further planning? Is it project completion? What are these next steps for these different areas? And you see that as an objective in the next year in finding what those next steps are. And then lastly, we did have some flood-related studies move forward. In the last year, we began a study in the Slow Creek, East Fork of Slow Creek, through our Zone 9, Flood Control Zone 9, and then we also were completing a letter of map revision with FEMA in the Cambria area related to the flood improvements that were constructed some time ago. So those were accomplishments. And so looking ahead for the next year, we'll have this East Fork study completed in Zone 9, as well as we're looking to develop a pilot program for vegetation management in the county area of Zone 9 as well. And we expect to see that come out and come before the board in the next fiscal year as well. And I think with that, I'm passing it off to Mladen.
All right, thanks, Brendan. All right, so for the groundwater program, so Sigma has been our top priority, and we're in year 5 of GSP development, groundwater sustainability plan development. And so this next fiscal year, 21-22, is going to be the last year where all the plans that needed to have been submitted for the priority basins have been submitted. And so what we're going to shift is from development and plan development into plan implementation. And Courtney was kind of alluding to the strategy that the board has directed staff to start to look at for that. So the big accomplishments for this past fiscal year, have been implementation or continuing implementation for the Paso Basin GSP. The annual reports have been submitted. So far, there have been 2 that have been submitted by the April 1st deadlines. Staff has been coordinating with the other GSAs in the basin. There's 4 of them, including the county, and has been providing services to maintain the cooperative committee meeting and continuing administrative work for that. And given that we're in the second year after submittal of the Paso Basin GSP, which was January 2020, we're anticipating that DWR, the State Water Resources, Department of Water Resources, will submit their comments or review of the plan sometime in this next 6-10 months for that. The next big effort in the Paso Basin was completion of the aerial or airborne groundwater mapping, AEM or SkyTEM. That project was where the state, DWR, Stanford University, the Kingdom of Denmark had collaborated and done pilot tests in 3 counties. San Luis Obispo was one of them. And this is where they flew a helicopter with a big hoop over the Paso Basin to kind of get a better picture of what was underneath. Staff had presented that just recently on the 20th of April. And so that's available if you're interested. And so those results are there. So the next step is to incorporate those results into the next model update, or to be determined in the next model update. The next big accomplishment was the continuing development of the GSP for the San Luis Obispo Basin and Rio Grande Basins. Both of these have received grant funding to complete their GSPs. For San Luis Obispo Basin, it's a requirement for them to submit the GSAs there to submit the plan by the deadline. And for Rio Grande, even though it's a very low priority basin in state priority, it's a very high priority basin for all of the needs in the county here. So we're continuing efforts to leverage that grant and continue development. Both those projects should be completed by next year, and those plans being completed. We've also continued to support Los Osos Basin. They're in their 5th year, roughly their 5th year of implementation of their court-required basin plan. And the Basin Management Committee has been the committee leading basin management efforts there. And so county staff has supported that. And then the last task, or the last accomplishment, has been completion of the task 1 of the Adelaida area study. So the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, has been working on task 1, which is compiling existing data in the area, looking at it to see what would be needed in the next phases or steps for that study. We're going to the board in June to seek direction from the board of supervisors on the next steps, which would be collecting new data and compiling that, analyzing that and compiling that, and developing a report. And that's a 5-year project study for that. The objectives that we're looking forward to this next fiscal year is completing the Siloam and AG Basin GSPs, continuing to support the Paso Basin in the transition of their implementation. So again, as Courtney mentioned, the Board of Supervisors has directed staff to hire a director level position to manage the implementation and management of all the basins in the county that have management operations. So for instance, Paso Basin, San Luis Obispo Basin, Los Osos, support for Cuyama, and anything else that comes online in the future. And so that handoff, as Courtney was mentioned, is going to take a while, at least half a year for the director to come on board, to get their consultant team on board, and then to start to look at what needs to be handed off and how that's going to work. Next objective is we're continuing to engage with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the Salinas Dam ownership transfer project. We're still in communicating with them as the Army Corps is continuing to finalize their disposition study. And so we're working with them and congressional representatives on figuring out what our next steps, the county's next steps are for that project. And the last few objectives are continuing to work with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation on the Salinas River Basin study and supporting that effort. Continuing to support Los Osos in the continued administration, and as well as looking into funding and implementation for that basin. And then the last one is again, as I mentioned, in June, to go to the board for the next steps for the Adelaida project and seeking that direction. With that, I'll hand it back to Courtney.
All right, well, I'm gonna play the role of Kathy Martin, who's out right now from our team, but she's our technical unit supervisor. And so their accomplishments have been receiving a grant to improve the telemetry for all of our rain and stream gauges. They've continued to do over 48 stream and rain gauges and over 300 groundwater level measurements in April and October each year, and all of the data requests and data management that goes along with that. They are coordinating with local agencies to support the installation of stream gauges. So in areas where basin management entities have been formed, and they've been expanding even more on the monitoring in those areas. So we've been trying to coordinate with them and make sure that the approach is consistent. And so looking forward to next fiscal year, they're looking forward to implementing the project. They're going to be working on that over the summer, and that's really going to help with interference. Right now, all the data can interfere with each other, so this is a new technology that you can time it so that it all comes in, and that will be really important, especially in the Rio Grande area for when we have flooding in Oceano. The other one is working with Creekwinds on the Rio Grande stream gauge modification project. They've got a grant to modify a big barrier to stream flow for fish passage. So we have a stream gauge there, so we're coordinating with them to continue the data collection, but also improve flow through that area. And then just continuing to operate and maintain our existing program and expand it. We've been directed to look at make sure we've gotten all the publicly owned wells in our groundwater level measuring program. So that will be an effort going forward as well. And I apologize for competing conference calls here in the background. To wrap it up, we have a reserve. We've been trying to be deliberate about what our savings account is set aside for. So in addition to the $3.1 million we have set aside for any kind of emergency need, we also have this other regional resiliency reserve where that savings account we kind of keep track of for any additional studies beyond that 25% we have to look at areas that we don't understand or to move forward on certain programs. For cash flow loans for that category, the second priority category. And then looking to the future as we're doing these planning efforts and identifying solutions, maybe it's a down payment on the next regional infrastructure project. But it's one-time money, so we want to be pretty deliberate on how we recommend that money be used. So more to come with that going forward. Slide. Again, there's lots of documents that were attached to the staff report. I know Brendan's ready to pull any of those up if you guys have questions of those, but hopefully that provides you more detail and enjoy looking at those. It's all the numbers and the 5-year plan that goes along with those objectives that my teammates and I went over. Yeah, just that. Any questions?
All right, so thank you. so much for that great presentation. Nice, good-looking budget. Glad to see the programs and the accomplishments and objectives layout was really helpful. So thank you for that. Okay, questions, comments from our WRAC board members, and then we'll open it up to the public. Hillary.
I have a few questions. Courtney, do you want me to just do them one at a time? I think I have 3.
Yeah, one at a time would be great.
Okay, my first one is the language was used like talking about post-Sigma planning phase, and then listing accomplishments, and one of them was PASO groundwater sustainability plan implementation. I'm not aware of any implementation that has taken place, and by calling it an accomplishment, it infers to me that we've done like projects or gotten supplemental water or recycled water or made any, you know, cutbacks on groundwater pumping. Is that, am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, that's an element of implementation. There's a lot of administrative elements, and I guess that's where we focus as staff, getting those annual reports done and submitted on time, coordinating with the cooperative committee, all the agendas, the minutes, the advertising, the monitoring, a lot of those things that go into meeting Sigma requirements.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, thanks for the clarification. It makes sense. Also, I wanted to know, we have had some conversations from people who are outside of different groundwater basins in our county that, and I believe rightfully so, don't think that it's their responsibility to pay for implementation of plans in other basins. I was wondering if there was any conversation about that in your process, or if you can give me any idea about what the thoughts are at the county on that topic of conversation.
Okay, yeah, I'll defer to Maude if he wants to add to that, and maybe you want to add to that last question too.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Hillary.
Hi.
So let me just answer the last question. So Hillary, flood control district staff, you know, and part of the planning was helping with the Salinas Dam project, which is in the GSP. So that was a lot of support that the board had supported. And the second thing was we were also completing and finishing the SkyTem project, which is going to go a long way to helping understanding where recharge is going to be most helpful in the basin. So that was a big effort to get those reports. So those are, each individual GSA was also working on their own things. So Shannon San Juan Water District, City of Paso was doing their SEP program. San Miguel was submitting grants. They submitted a grant for their wastewater plant. So individual GSAs were also taking efforts along the way in the last year, especially during COVID. So your question about what the future for paying or for funding is going to be in the basin, right now we don't know. Those kind of questions are still to be determined. The plan, the GSP does contemplate having a fee regulation in it. And so the first step to do that is a fee study. That study takes somewhere about 8 to 10 months to go through, where you reach out to stakeholders, you lay out some of the options for funding, and then you look into what that would look like in terms of paying for administrative fees. There are also other options in terms of looking at other funding mechanisms that are available, such as the Prop 218 and property assessments, anything that's tied to a specific benefit or project assessments. So those are all still to be determined, and would probably be one of the next tasks for the GSAs in the basin.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, and I apologize for this because I'm a little bit unprepared. I did not look at the budget documents. But is there if you know off the top of your head, otherwise I can do it after this, and you don't need to take your time to do it, but if you know off the top of your head, is there a dollar amount assigned to implementation of the Paso Basin GSP?
Yeah, so Corinne, yeah, so the one thing I do know is what we have and what we're submitting is for the annual report costs. So the county does share 61% of that cost, and I think it's about $80,000 for that cost. And so the cooperative committee did approve a budget back in December. They also approved some costs for grant application. I think those were kind of like the two things. The cooperative committee hasn't recommended any other budgets or hasn't proposed anything. And so until that happens, or that would be where we would, seek recommendation from the advisory committee to move forward.
That's great. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and just to distinguish, there are two funding sources. There's the general fund and then the flood control district fund. And thank you, Courtney, I saw the nod there. So the Board of Supervisors had approved a $1.3 to $2.6 million budget per year for Sigma implementation. And so that's where that funding comes from. The Flood Control District General Fund does have some money set aside for studies as well. And you're right, I did not look to see what specifically for, I don't think for implementation, we don't have any flood control in there, but staff continues to support in-kind services from the general flood control general fund.
Thank you. Great questions, Hillary, and I appreciate the responses. And so I just want to make sure that I'm getting that right. In terms of the new Sigma director, and so that's outside of Public Works, it's outside of the flood control district. It's getting funded generally by the general fund, but the flood control district is kind of supporting it, but to these smaller levels. Am I getting that right?
That's correct. Any direct contributions to consultants or specific work efforts are not planned in the flood control district funds to the degree that they don't contribute to studies or existing commitments that the district has. For instance, the SkyTem or the AEM was a prior commitment. But yeah, all the funding from flood control district to support GSP implementation is in the form of staffing.
And this line of questioning is a good indicator of the project that lays ahead of us of transitioning these duties and making it clear to everyone who's doing what and as we go forward, especially and what's funding what. So yeah, this is a good indicator of what we have ahead of us for this transition period.
Right, especially in the basins are kind of slightly different places in their GSPs, et cetera, in terms of development. So great, thank you. Christine.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate Hillary's questions, and I just want to follow up because I'm still trying to get it clear in my mind where all the funding is coming from, which pots and which pots that it's going into. So we've been talking about the Paso Basin. Has the general fund approval by the Board of Supervisors given equal funding to each of the GSPs in the different areas, or only Paso?
Yeah, so Christine, I think I might have mentioned this last time as well, but it's worth repeating. Every quarter, we bring to the Board of Supervisors the current status of funding that has been supporting Sigma implementation or Sigma development. And the next one is going to be June 8th. We'll bring on consent the Sigma status update, and the attachment 2 in that board packet has laid out both the current general fund support that has been given and less any revenue such as grants and contributions that have been provided. We also provided per the board's request, which is kind of similar to what you're asking, what is the combined total for each basin and estimated maybe future costs. And so there's a second in that attachment, a supplement that kind of shows what has been spent to date and what's estimated to be spent by the end of this next fiscal year, 2021-22. and then also including the in-kind services that flood control has provided, as well as general funds. You can see the totals of those in that report. And I'd be happy to you know, maybe in a future meeting, kind of describe that if you want to know.
So that report is broken down, the total cost or expenses broken down into individual groundwater basins.
Right, correct. We have got 6 different basin accounts. When Sigma started, we had 6 priority basins based on some boundary modifications. Some of those kind of split. And so, yeah, we've been spending funds from both flood control district as in-kind services and general funds in various basins depending on the need and what actions need to be taken. So we, you know, we can see what the breakdown is.
Mladen, would we be able to get that report in June's meeting, our WRAC meeting in June, or some breakdown of that, some kind of a picture of that for the next meeting, please?
I'd be happy to present if you know, that's the direction or that's the desire.
Thank you.
It'd be an attachment to our monthly updates for Sigma.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable. Could be pulled for discussion if needed, but at least the information is there. That'd be great. Thank you. Any other questions from members in terms of the budget, accomplishments, goals, any of those kinds of things? David.
Yes, I'm sure all of us saw this week's shredder in New Times, and it involved apparently taking as yet unallocated nacimiento water and moving it into the east end of the Paso Robles groundwater basin. And I was wondering, I've never heard of this before, is this part of ongoing budgeting in terms of the analysis on the GSPs, or is this completely out of left field?
Who wants to take that on?
Oh, yeah.
I'll take it on.
That's okay.
So that's the Shannon San Juan Water District is doing that, and I plan at the end of this meeting to ask for a full presentation at the next meeting to discuss the applications, what they're for, how they came about, all of that. And David, you can call me anytime. I'll give you a private briefing.
So great, thank you to Steve. I appreciate that. And it's not an agendized item today in terms of being able to have a full discussion. Specific to the budget, I don't know, Courtney, if there's anything that is germane that needs to be talked about right now. Otherwise, we can follow up with Steve when we do our budget bit. And then Courtney, I'll wait for your response, and then Tim, you're next.
Okay, yeah, just that's a good opportunity to remind everyone that there's when a program or project or contract is set up and running, there's usually an advisory committee or a commission that's associated with implementation of that. So that brings to mind the Nacimiento Commission. So things within the purview of Nacimiento Reservoir and its operations would be addressed by that commission. The GSP implementation, again, is the cooperative committee or the commission, whichever one has, you know, that group that has been established in that basin. So I just wanted to provide that as another opportunity when things come up that aren't necessarily in the flood control district zone general purview. There may be other venues out there that are taking those issues up. So just thought that might be a good opportunity to provide that information to you all to keep in mind as well.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Courtney. Tim, and then Linda.
Yeah, Courtney, I think your team has done a great job. I mean, the budgeting and all this stuff has come so far over the past, 5-6 years. Just really amazing work that you guys are doing to help us understand this stuff. But sort of along the lines of what Christine was saying, I look at the objectives, like for the groundwater program as an example, and you have in the budget, I think it's like 1.4 million or somewhere in that range to accomplish the priorities or the objective for the groundwater program. And, you know, you've got some pretty lofty goals and objectives for the 20, you know, for the annual work. And I guess in my mind, I'm looking at the objectives, and I'm looking at the budget, and I'm thinking, well, it would be really helpful to know, sort of along Christine's inquiry, you know, what that breakdown of money is, but also possibly if we could see, you know, are these actual ongoing projects that you're hoping to accomplish over the course of the year? And I'm sure that some of them are multi-year or whatever, but it would help me understand how the budgeting is being utilized. I guess as an example, the Salinas Dam thing, kind of low-hanging fruit. I mean, that has been going on already for 4 or 5 years. So I'm trying to get my head around where the priorities lie. I don't know if that's a question, but I guess I'm looking for more information as to when or how or what portion of the budget is being put towards that, and what we should expect over the course of the next year for those particular objectives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like if, you know, looking at where in the 5-year plan, basically, where we have line items for those different projects, understanding what milestones go along with each of those projects over time. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly, and kind of seeing where they fall and where we are in the various objectives.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I hope.
I mean.
Yeah, I hope to tackle that in this next year, so that when I come to you next year, we'll have even better tool to communicate to you what those milestones are. Really looking forward to what we're going to come together as a division again. We've kind of had our Sigma unit doing its thing, but looking, okay, once that's transitioned off, where are the other areas we don't understand, and how can we redistribute workload within our team to help advance these projects a little bit better, and also have the bandwidth to communicate to everyone those milestones and develop those tools, you know, that explain the plan for over time for each of these projects. So I do hope to take that input and do an even better job of explaining each of these objectives and the milestones over time. I could verbally do it a little bit right now if you wanted me to, but I do want to create some more visual information for everyone.
Thanks, Clay.
And it's heavily dependent on, you know, the priorities that come up throughout the year. So, you know, the Sigma decision was a good one. So we're kind of do our best to project what might be coming. And luckily, it's, you know, a budget that has a bottom line. And so as things change over the course of the fiscal year, we can kind of reallocate, and that's what we thought we were going to do, and put more towards what we actually are directed to do. So that's what I'm hoping to do, even in more detail, perhaps, this what we did do and what we plan to do, having more key milestones for each of those line items.
That's great. Thank you. Great question, Tim. And it seems like I could imagine, just so we don't, this time next year when we're looking at budget, to be able to have perhaps a focus session on projects the meeting before, so that we can, if you are able to kind of build in those milestones, we can look at those more thoroughly. So that might be helpful. Thank you. Linda Tipping.
Yes, Courtney, I want to come back to this decision that the groundwater sustainability manager will be outside of Public Works, and your comments that it's going to take a substantial amount of time to glean out all of the various things that will shift to that responsibility and what will overlap with Public Works and the water works that are completed here. And I'm hoping, and I would like to suggest that as you move forward with that we get some kind of an update or be involved in what some of the thinking is as it moves along. You know, clearly some responsibilities belong at the GS Groundwater Sustainability Manager's desk. At the same time, there will be a lot of overlap, and that overlap may be clear as mud, and the staff would bring one perspective to how to clean that up. But if you bring it to the WRAC, where we've got such a large, diverse group of people, that there may be some input from us that may, it would help us to understand what's happening. At the same time, it may provide you with some other perspectives on how things might be allocated at some point in time, or how things are going to coordinate down.
That's good input. Thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely take that back and see how we can integrate keeping the WRAC up to date on those decisions as they get made, and the ones that can be, vetted in advance, so we can get good input as we go forward. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Any other member questions on the budget? I'm not seeing any. Holler and unmute if I missed you. And then I'll open it up for comments or questions from non-members, if there's anybody who wants to comment on the budget.
Andy, it's Greg Graywell.
Hey, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, for 58 years, we've been involved in state water, and there's only certain people that benefit from that, yet all the taxpayers in the county pay for that. So when we're concerned about who's paying for what, I'd like the people that don't have any benefit of state water to not have to pay for state water. 50% of the property taxes collected in this district pay 50% of the budget in this county. What is the acreage or the percentage of taxes that are collected in North County to pay for North County's issues? The unincorporated area is the one that's paying most of the money, and they're less than 1/3 of the population. $5.8 million, almost $6 million, was in matching funds given to work on the GSPs for the 5 basins that had issues. So nobody was paying any money. In fact, the San Juan district claimed they spent $325,000 on the basin when they made it to make their own district, and got matching funds and never kicked in anything. So when people are looking at who's paying for what, it's amazing to me how when somebody else is paying the tab for them, it's no big deal. But when they think they're paying for somebody else, it's a big deal. And I think if we're going to be concerned about the percentage of what's being spent in different areas, we might want to look at the percentage of what's being collected in certain areas to pay for those things. In AB 3030 in 2009 that was completed in 2012, Courtney Howard represented the county, Christopher Alekel represented the city of Paso Robles. Each of those entities kicked in $35,000, and the DWR gave us $208,000 to do that project. So we got most of the money from that, and we do the work according. It was finished in 2012 with the DWR in charge of that, and we had no problems in our basin until 2013. So this stuff is amazing. We're 61% of the vote, $80,000 of the percentage.
It's just
Of
me,
cost for what's going on. okay, let's look at how much tax over that area to
Is it just me or are we losing Greg? Yeah, we can't hear him.
Did you hear my comments or not?
We heard almost all of it. You're kind of both running out of virtual bandwidth and out of time as well. Did you want to wrap up a final remark on that, Greg, or a question?
No, I mean, the bottom line I want to say is that I want to know how much money is being collected over the taxes that pay for stuff in any given area. And then when people ask, how come somebody else is paying for it? They can look at what they've been paying for the whole time they've owned land here that pay for everybody else's resources that don't contribute to the benefits that they get. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that comment.
Hello, this is Patricia. I would just like to add some detail to the board's decision to go this route of a county GSA director. I think it's worth noting that they called this a consultant-based model. So in terms of work product, it is set to include a technical and field work consultant, an administrative and financial consultant, a regulatory and legal consultant, and an environmental consultant. So these tasks, it is my understanding, will be held by these or done by these various consultants, some of whom have already shown interest. And I think it's worth mentioning also that the board went this route because they did not want to have what was originally proposed, which was 5 full-time staff doing GSP implementation. So I just think it's an interesting model, and I think it's going to be enlightening to see how well it actually works out and how efficient it is. And I think that's something worth the WRAC getting updates about as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Are there any other public comments on the budget? All right. So I will bring it back to the members for any follow-up questions. If staff had anything they wanted to follow up with, otherwise we'll deliberate and go to a motion at some point for the budget. Any other discussion? I assume at this point this is a voting item? Sorry, I didn't notice what our
It's varied in the past. In the past, the WRAC has voted to support it or not opined or even formed a subcommittee to look at it in more detail. So it's it's presented open-ended on the agenda.
Gotcha. So we have a couple of choices here. If folks feel like there's anything, I haven't heard a change in direction yet, but we could either move to recommend the budget as proposed. We could form a subcommittee, an ad hoc task force to review it more deeply. Does anybody want to weigh in one way or the other? All right. So it seems the default one, if we feel like this is a good direction, we'd probably have a motion to recommend approval. Is that fair, Brendan? Is that kind of what we'd be looking for at this point?
Yes.
Yeah. Or we take no action at all.
No action is fine too. I can just take your input back that I heard today and
I'll make a motion
going forward.
I'll make a motion to approve the what is it, 21-22 budget as proposed by Courtney's group.
Great. And then,
Seconded. I'll second. This is Ray Dienzo.
okay, so, sorry, Tim Walters and Ray Dienzo to second. And then incorporating, I don't think we actually made any specific directions for changes to the budget, but there was incorporation of kind of discussions and potential fine tuning as it goes along, I think it's fair to say. Okay, so that's a motion to approve as, or recommend as proposed. Any further discussion on this? All right, seeing none, why don't we let folks unmute and we'll do a voice vote. And then we'll go for yeses first and then noes. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Awesome. Any opposed?
Aye.
Sorry,
could you announce your name, please? Who, just want to get who voted no.
There was one no, at least. I'm not.
Yes.
Somebody want to own their no? Okay, in any case, the motion carries. So okay. Thank you for that. It's kind of a directional one anyway.
All right.
Okay, thanks everyone. Good discussion. Thank you to all the staff that participated in this and carries this good work forward. I really feel like we have a much better understanding of what's next. All right, the next item on our agenda is to discuss the approach for future meeting planning and future agenda items. This is an item that I'll just spend a moment on, is that as Ray Dienzo came on as the vice chair and talked about, you know, some of his impressions of our meetings versus his time as staff and now as a member, and then working with Brendan and Courtney, we did have a meeting and talked about what are you know, what do we accomplish? Where's our greatest strength in order to be you know, efficient and effective as an advisory body? And so we have a couple of potential tweaking of how we run these meetings. So I just want to go over them. It's on your agenda report. And so the idea is to focus on our purpose of WRAC and thinking about each of our meetings that we'd like to make sure that we're effective and relevant, and that we are strategic with the agenda items themselves. We are currently scheduled for 10 meetings a year. We take off July and August. We often cancel. We have, since I've been on this, we have always canceled the January meeting because it's like January 2nd and we're all not quite back yet. And then probably couple times a year, we end up canceling a meeting because there's really nothing of particular substance that we want to put together. So our hope is to be more strategic and focused with the meetings that we do have together, and maybe have placeholders for some of the meetings that we are not planning on meeting, but in case something comes up that we have that time slot reserved. And so we might just schedule and plan for 6 meetings over the year with a few placeholders, where then we give you kind of a month's notice, like no meeting, you know, next month was a placeholder, and we don't have any topic at this time, so no meeting. So, and then in terms of the topics themselves, the kind of the officer team would get together perhaps in August and map out what are the deliverables that the staff is working on that they'd like to have feedback on, that WRAC would like to weigh in on in some way. And so we kind of target, along with our required activities like electing officers and reviewing the budget and those types of bylaw requirements. So we would kind of map out the year and focus on what are what are the topics that we want to have as a body, a shared foundation of knowledge, so that when that policy does come before us, that we're able to engage effectively. So in the agenda packet, we picked several items, and our plan is that after today's meeting, sometime in the next week or so, we're going to send out a survey to all of the RAC members and the alternates and see, you know, just very simple, like, what are the things that you think would be your top 5 to hear about? So water infrastructure resiliency, urban water management plans, agriculture irrigation efficiency, landscape irrigation efficiency, industrial hospitality, restaurant water efficiency, drought conditions and impacts, desalination, stormwater capture, etc. That's kind of the list that we have so far. And so kind of bringing this back to RAC in the moment to see, one, does this kind of, as an overall structure, does this seem like a good fit for folks? And then 2, is there, are there other topics, and they can just show up on the survey, but if there's anything else that you want to make sure that we take on in the next year. So, you know, kind of those big picture to try to get some speakers with, you know, expertise, technical knowledge. Ray, do you have anything you want to kind of add or expand on what this conversation is about?
Yes. So, so the point, the original point that I thought about this when I suggested it to you and to Brendan was, I wanted to believe it or not, I wanted RAC to be more relevant than, you know, than something that's not relevant, because it's something that I think when I used to be staff, it got to a point where a meeting would be scheduled, and then there wouldn't be enough topics, then we would cancel it. And I think part of the reason is that there's a lot of issues now that have been taken off RAC's plate. For example, a lot of the GSAs that have been formed, those have become localized issues and really gone outside the purview of RAC. Granted, there are some that bleeds into an overall county policy issues that would be under the purview of RAC, but those issues are rare. It would be, I think it would be better if, kind of like what you already stated here, that if there were focused meetings that we would all plan to attend. Doesn't have to be a lot of meetings, but they're focused meetings throughout the year, but less meetings. So we wouldn't have to, you know, oh, I wonder if RAC's going to get canceled this month. It's you know, that won't come into any of our mindsets. But it's more of focused topics that we can plan for throughout the year, and I believe that's very doable, and it would definitely make our meetings, I guess, more like a lot better than I'm not saying that it's not good at the moment, but I think that it would definitely enhance our scope in these water topics.
Thank you, Ray. And I don't, you know, I know a couple of years ago we talked about reducing them quarterly, and there was a lot of pushback, and I think that would be too infrequent. And part of the reason is also, along with this shared knowledge, is just being able to connect with each other, right? As Linda pointed out earlier, it's like this is a really diverse group that's got a lot of different connections and interests, and it's really important for us to be able to hear from each other, connect with each other, and provide this forum for cross communication, for communication. So that's the intent. Are there any comments, questions, concerns? The kind of action item on our side will be to, you know, send out this survey. Steve, I see you unmute. Were you wanting to say something?
Yeah, I just calculated I've been coming to these meetings for 40 years, and there there are times when we're relevant because the supervisors value what we have to say, and there are times when we're irrelevant because they don't pay any attention to us. So there's two pieces to this. There's the quality of our work, and I think that this proposal, this more focused proposal, is probably a good one. We do kind of have sometimes some pretty scattered subject matter, and I think that would get people who are interested to come and listen to us more. So I think that would be good. I support it, but I also want to point out that there are going to be times when we're just going to be irrelevant, whether we're doing good work or not.
Points well made. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Great. Well, thank you for that, and look for the survey. And this will start with the fall quarter. So we'll go ahead and meet next month. Anything else on future agenda items? I know, Steve, you were also bringing up maybe this would be a time for you to clarify your request.
Yeah, I don't know that I need to clarify, but if I do, I will. I'd like to have maybe 15 minutes to 20 minutes to present and answer questions about the applications that we filed for supplemental water from Nasmiano and Salinas.
Everybody okay with that for next month? Brendan, do we have time on the agenda for that next month?
I think for 15 minutes, yeah. And then we have Madeline presenting on stormwater capture, and I do need to check with the team here about if June is a good time for the Adelaida study update. But depending on the length of that, I don't see a problem. So.
Right. Thank you. And I know that we're already starting to form up our September meeting to focus on drought response, resiliency, and getting some expertise on that one. All right. Okay, and with that, our final item is public comment for items not on the agenda. This is members or non-members, if anybody has something they want to share.
Yeah,
Andy.
this is Nick Teague. Sorry.
Yeah, Nick.
Oh, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, this is Nick Teague with the City of San Luis Obispo. I just wanted to notify the group that the city is currently updating our urban water management plan to meet state requirements. We're required to do that every 5 years. So we're requesting input from interested agencies or individuals relative to the update. And we're expected to have a draft completed by the end of the month. So if you're interested in providing feedback, we can send you a copy of the draft via email or standard mail. Just reach out to myself or Jennifer.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, the City Council had a study session on it last month, so there's an agenda report on that as well. So thank you. Greg, was that you?
Yes, thank you,
Yeah, go
Andy.
ahead. Sure.
I'm only bringing this up because it was mentioned partially, and it had to do with the annual reports that were done on the Paso Robles Basin. The second trial in the quiet title action, there was 5 trials so far. The second trial was Paso Robles suing Atascadero Water Mutual. And the reason I bring it up is because Paso was claiming that Atascadero was not a separate subbasin. And Atascadero lost in court. There's a decision against them. But here, one of the representatives that works for GSI, he was also a witness in that trial as an expert for Atascadero, but Atascadero lost. He works for GSI now, and he's the one that was doing the annual reports. For the first annual report covered 3 years, 17, 18, and 19. And it gave the amounts of water that was coming from the basin that Paso Robles and other agencies were using. This last year, when the next annual report was given, they corrected the first 3 years because they subtracted water that came from the Atascadero subbasin. So the reason I bring this up is because Paso sued Atascadero saying they weren't separate in one, And now they're putting in annual reports that they're separate because they have a court order against them on how much water they can take out of the basin. This is how agencies manipulate numbers and reports to fit their agendas. And I pretty much think that this is unacceptable, but I wanted the board to know about this. So numbers matter, where the water comes from matters, what people should do matters, and who these different agencies that get hired back and forth between different communities. It's amazing to me how they're the same people, and then their past reports don't matter and their new reports do matter. So I just wanted the people to know that.
Thank you, Greg. Any other comments for items not on the agenda? All right, I think we did it, people. Thank you so much, and we will see you next month. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.